This is part of my memoir, Maha Unshackled. If you're just joining, you might want to start to read from the beginning. The first chapters are already posted. Introduction, Karmic Seeds, The Diplomat, Stockholm Syndrome, First Blood. When school was over in 1990, Maysoon and I went to visit my mother in Yemen for the summer. The day we arrived from the airport, we were shocked to see my mother 9 months pregnant. We didn't have a clue. For some unexplained reason, and until this day, I don't know why, no one told Maysoon and I that my mother was pregnant. Even on those long phone calls that we snuck in behind my father's back, she didn't bother to mention it. It was probably 1 hour since we arrived from Riyadh as my mother started to have cramps. Call your aunt, her old sister. Tell her I need her to come with me to the hospital. I'm going into labor, she screamed to me. And just like that, on June 14th, 1990, my sister Hadil was born. Later that evening, I was on the phone with my father, who called from Riyadh to check in. Did you know? Did you know that mother was pregnant? Why didn't you tell us? I asked him. It was never explained to us. It was a difficult delivery. My mother had to have a cesarean surgery. My mother said that the doctor told her that because she was going through a divorce while she was pregnant and she was under a lot of stress, it would impact the baby. The baby would be irritable and have anger issues. We were supposed to return to Saudi Arabia when the summer was over to live with my father and finish the school year. My father had only 1 year left in his diplomatic assignment to Riyadh. My mother was living in my grandfather's house, her father's house. My grandfather had died earlier that year, and all of his 8 surviving children, my 4 uncles, 3 aunts, and my mother, were to split up the inheritance. With all this uncertainty of where my mother would live after the inheritance was settled, Maysoon and I were determined to stay with my mother no matter where she ended up living. My grandfather's house was a 3 bedroom house, but before my grandfather died, he had built a small 2 bedroom guest house in the backyard. 2 rooms were stacked on top of each other, one on the first floor and the other on the second floor, with one tiny little bathroom that didn't even have a bathtub. The guest house was nearly finished before my grandfather died, but the construction stopped when he passed away. He built it for my mother and told all of his sons, my uncles, to allow her to live there. But because of how inheritance laws are dictated by the Muslim religion in Yemen, it wasn't guaranteed that my mother would keep the guest house that my grandfather had built for her. So picture this. In this 3 bedroom house lived my mother and her now 4 daughters, my grandfather's 2 widows, including my grandmother. Oh, yeah, and remember my aunt that committed suicide? The only daughter my grandmother had from her first husband that died in the war when she was 12 years old? Her now one and only daughter, my cousin, was living with us in the same house. She was 24 years old. Her name was Nejla, and lived most of her life in Cairo, Egypt, in an apartment that her dad, who happened to also be an ambassador like my father, purchased for her and hired a nanny to raise her on her own while he traveled across the world on diplomatic assignments with his new wife and their son. Nejla never met any of her family from her mother's side, meaning my mother, her aunts, and her uncles. She even spoke in an Egyptian accent that she had picked up from her nanny growing up, which is different from the Yemeni accent that we all spoke. She told me that her father was not happy that she was now living at my late grandfather's house with all of us. When I asked how she connected with our extended family, she said my other aunt, who's married to the sheikh, was vacationing in Egypt and decided to look for her and visit with her. They bonded immediately, as she was very lonely. She immediately decided to visit her home country, Yemen, which she had never done in her entire life. She loved having family around for the first time and decided to stay indefinitely. A week later, my youngest uncle had just graduated from medical school. He was studying abroad in Pakistan. Now he and his wife and their 3 children were living with us in my grandfather's 3-bedroom house. 13 people were crammed in a 3-bedroom house. My newborn baby sister Hedil would cry uncontrollably all night long. Since my mother was still recovering from her cesarean surgery, I was the one who would take care of the baby. I would cradle her and sing to her until she fell asleep. I changed her diapers, fed her, and washed her bottles. My mother didn't have breast milk in her, so I fed her formula that my father would send to us from Riyadh. My mother struggled with naming her newborn for the first month of her little life. She would jokingly say, "I want to name her Enough. Enough, girls, for God's sake." I took care of Hedil as if she was my own child. I quite enjoyed it as well. Oh, how much I loved and adored my baby sister. When she first started talking, she would call me Mama. The summer was almost over, and Maysoon and I were supposed to return to live with my father. But we both said, no way, we're staying with Mom. There were heated arguments over the phone with my father, and we were getting a lot of pressure from our extended family to go live with our father in a more stable home. Out of nowhere, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in August 1990, and my father immediately got sent back home to Sana'a because, for some strange reason, the Yemeni president at that time decided it was a good idea to support Saddam's invasion. So the Saudis immediately shut down the Yemen embassy in Riyadh and ended their diplomatic relationship with Yemen. With my father's house being right next door to my grandfather's house, my father was now only a few steps away. Yet Maysoon and I were so stubborn and refused to move in with him. It was time for my mother and her 7 siblings to figure out what they were going to do with my grandfather's house. Can we please make this civilized? How about we distribute the inheritance according to financial needs? Some of us are financially wealthy and some of us are not, my aunt suggested. So everyone gathered in a circle, and everyone said out loud what they wanted and what they were willing to give away. It was that simple and peaceful. They decided to finish building the guest house and gave it to my mother to respect my grandfather's intentions. They gave my uncle, who just graduated from medical school, the main house to live in with his wife and kids. Maysoon and I lived with my mother and my 2 sisters, Manal and Hadil, in the tiny 2-bedroom guest house for the following 2 years. We rarely visited my father, even though he was living next door to us. My uncle, Abdulaziz, showed up one day. "Your dad lives by himself, a single man that doesn't have anyone to take care of him, and you 2 are here with your mom sweeping and cleaning the house. It's not fair. Why don't you clean your dad's house? He needs help," he told me and Maysoon. So every weekend, my sister and I would go clean his house and leave as soon as we're done. It was 1992. My parents got back together, and we all moved back to my father's house next door. I remember people congratulating us because my parents were back together, and now we would live a more stable life. But I felt this deep sadness inside of me because I knew that they would argue and that the nasty fights would return. On January 6, 1993, my fifth sister, Melek, was born. At this point, my mother had no interest whatsoever in this newborn baby of hers. I am retiring from motherhood. I raised you, and now it is your turn to pay me back. So you are going to raise your two little sisters, Hadil and Melek, my mother bluntly told me. From then on, it was 100% my responsibility to take care of my younger sisters. I was 15 years old and lived life just like a single mother would. My mother was nowhere to be found, went to weddings and social events. She even would travel and go on vacations with her sisters. I can't go out with you. I have the kids. Who's going to watch them if I go out? Was my response to all the social invites that I would get from my friends at school. This was an excerpt from my upcoming memoir. Stay tuned for more. P.S. My memoir is complete and has been sitting on my laptop for months now, staring at me like, now what? So please share this post and help me find the right publisher. Or better yet, if you can slip it to Oprah or Reese Witherspoon, I'll owe you free yoga classes for life. Please subscribe for free to receive the next chapter.